Welcome to the FCS, a part of FCS Fans Nation, where we go down all the jackrabbit holes, are loaded with hotter takes in the inferno, and have a bigger crown than Duke Dog himself. The show you didn't want, you definitely didn't need, but here you are. Let's get into this. What is going on, FCS Fans Nation? Welcome to a new segment of the FCS Fans Nation. I guess we're a network now, who knows? But it's the FCS show, or the Football Chris show, because my name conveniently fits into the letters of FCS. And what this show is going to be, since this is the first time you guys have kind of seen it, this is basically going to be the normal FCS Fans Nation podcast. Isn't going anywhere. Matthew Frazee, Jamie, all those guys, Kyler Neal, unfortunately, still going to be running that down. I'm going to do a little bit more of this, still be a part of that, but this is more, that's all fan questions. That's what you guys want to hear. We got to get through as many as possible because that's what keeps you guys coming around. This is going to be more 1 to 3 times a week, quick hitters, 30-minute-ish podcasts on some of the bigger overlying issues that take a little bit more time to talk about. And because of that, the first one, Conference Realignment, has started, and because of that, I figured I'd bring in Brandon Owens, who's a member of the page that most of you know. He's been on the regular podcast. He runs Cocky Nation, also started up the ASUN podcast, which I'll let him talk about. But because the ASUN, brand new FCS conference, I figured there's nobody else to bring in, nobody better to bring in about Conference Realignment than Brandon Owens. Brandon, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How about you, Chris?
Fantastic. I mean, actually, maybe not fantastic. Texas and Oklahoma have kind of screwed up college football, but that's what we're here to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Everybody thinks that Texas and Oklahoma are the reason of all this realignment, but really the FCS has kind of been going on it for a bit here. So I kind of want to just cover what does it bounce back, spend a little bit of time just covering all the movement that's happened in the FCS just the last 2 to 3 years here. And then we'll talk about what's going to happen in the FBS landscape and how that's going to impact the G5 and the FCS and possibly a merger. Who knows, right? But why don't you kind of start with the ASUN, since you're the king and the all-knowing eye of sorts of the ASUN conference and its founding. Kind of run through some of the teams, where they came from and how it all came to be and what it's going to look like this year and in the future, because we might have to pick some teams to fill out that footprint as well.
Yeah, so it all started when the ASUN decided to announce its 20-team expansion, and then they were going to split into 2 conferences eventually. We don't know if that's still going to happen, but the ASUN did act on expanding. Excuse me, I'm battling being sick right now. But they, once COVID hit, that accelerated the expansion talks, and rumors started flying around about JSU going there. Not really any other teams, but everybody was kind of zoned in on JSU making the move. And then in November of last fall, there was a tweet that said EKU, JSU, and UCA are in discussions with the ASUN to make the move. So UCA coming from the Southland, JSU and EKU coming from the OVC. EKU got a lot of buzz of it because they are a founding member of the OVC, haven't been in another conference. They've always been in the OVC. But JSU was the outlier, so everybody kind of figured that JSU would be talking to the ASUN. And so when that was made official, the ASUN came out in January, made an official announcement, and announced that they were starting football in the ASUN. So they said UNA and KSU would join these 3 schools to make the ASUN football conference. Fast forward a few more months, that was only 5 teams. We didn't know what was going to happen. The WAC had just announced that it was bringing back football. So the ASUN and the 3 ASUN teams and the Texas 4 joined forces to create a 1-year only conference to get that AQ. And then in the process, the ASUN got a waiver for 2 years to get an AQ with only 5 teams.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. It's like there's only 5 teams. It's obviously becoming. You've been very vocal on this. For people that don't follow him on Twitter, he's got his Twitter handle up on the screen. There's going to have to be some more movement because there's no way they're sticking at 5 after this kind of AQ7 movement kind of happens with the WAC that's we're just about to talk about. So we'll move on to the rest of it, and then we'll be coming back for all the OVC fans, or sorry, old OVC fans probably, and some Big South, new ASUN fans, and it probably impacts a little bit of both of those too. But then you look at the WAC, and this impacts me a little bit, right? I'm a Big Sky guy. For those who don't know, I pull for Idaho. This is just crazy. Like you have the reigning national champion right now in Sam Houston leaving the Southland Conference to join this new WAC. And the WAC right now, a little bit further along in their membership than the ASUN. But part of that is because they have taken a little bit more of chances on some like up and coming talent. The ASUN kind of went and plucked more established programs. You look at it, like we mentioned, Sam Houston. I mean, no better time. The WAC is just patting themselves on the back for being smart enough to make that move. Then you got their rival in Stephen F. Austin. They're moving in also from the Southland. Lamar, Southland. Abilene Christian from the Southland. You have Dixie State coming from D2 down in St. George, Utah. You have Tarleton coming from like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, also a D2 program making the move up. Kind of gives a Frisco a home team now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see them make a run at the national championship and possibly be in Frisco.
Right. And then another Utah team, Southern Utah down in Cedar City. They're about 40 miles from Dixie State. So you get a cool new rivalry kind of like right off the bat there. And then you have a program who's just starting up football for the first time in Texas, Rio Grande Valley State, I believe. So, I mean, you have basically 7 established programs, 2 of which, are coming from like the D2 ranks. But then you have a program that's starting up. And I know starting up can be bad. I was part of the old WAC with the Idaho thing. So we saw the starting up of UTSA, the Roadrunners program. Surprisingly, it took them a while to get going, but it's not like they were instantly not competitive. We've seen it with Kennesaw. Kennesaw just started a program within this last decade and has had quite a bit of success. So there's 2 ways that can go. Next thing we know, Texas Rio Grande Valley is like an absolute player in the FCS playoffs, or, it could take them a little bit to get their feet under them. To kind of round out some of the conference movement that's happened really within like just the last year. I said 2 to 3 years. That's how much things have just been moving still, including Idaho coming back to the Big Sky. You have the Pioneer League just added St. Thomas, who's a D3 powerhouse. So be curious to see how they do in the non-scholarship kind of Pioneer League, etc. It already seems like San Diego is starting to lose their grip hold on that the last 2 or 3 seasons. It's just another program that comes in. It kind of feels, I don't know how you feel about St. Thomas. It feels like this is more of a holdover until they can get their program kind of there. I don't see St. Thomas staying in a non-scholarship type league.
No, not with the success they have. I think eventually they will they'll use the Pioneer as a stepping stone, so to say.
Get your foot in the door.
Until they can get the funding to have scholarships. And honestly, you could probably see them in the Missouri Valley.
Yeah, so if somebody moves, which we can get to here later. Big South, NCAA, huge get. At the time, it seemed like it was kind of there to keep the likes of like Kennesaw and North Alabama kind of happy. Monmouth, some of those teams have kind of been competitive, while the rest of the Big South maybe a little less so. But now they join, and most of those teams are gone. So that will be interesting to see, but it will be cool to see NCAA considered more of a modern blue blood, not necessarily blue blood, but really scratching at the door there to kind of become one of those perennial teams. But we haven't been able to see it because they've been in the MEAC, and because of that, they're playing the Celebration Bowl. So we haven't really gotten to see them outside of a couple non-conference matchups really get a shot to prove their mettle, as it were, against the top crop of the FCS in the playoffs. So we can see them in the Big South now.
Yeah, we'll see how NCAA does against like Kennesaw and Monmouth this year. Kennesaw and UNA won't move to the ASUN until 2022. So we get 1 season to see how NCAA matches up against traditional powers.
Yep. And then, you look at the rest of that. Gardner Webb, Campbell, Hampton, Robert Morris. Like, They're officially
Although
the big dog in there.
Although I do think Robert Morris might actually surprise some people. They won't win the Big South, but I think they could be that team that could spoil some things for certain teams.
Yeah, but I would say still going forward, NCNT is probably the lead dog in that conference, which isn't a bad spot to be, I guess. Maybe they don't look at realignment, but then you also have the SWAC, which this just kind of sucks for the MEAC. Traditionally, big HBCU powerhouse for a while, and now they're just kind of getting gutted. And you've seen some of the other MEAC type schools, which the MEAC usually is a little bit more of the East Coast, going up and down the Atlantic. And then you have the SWAC, which is more out in your Western HBCUs. Now you have teams just jumping ship from the East to West. It just fits this whole conference realignment mess we've got, where like West Virginia's in the Big 12. There was talks about Boise State and San Diego State playing in the old Big East, now the American. Like, geography doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter anymore. And now you've got schools like Prairie View A&M and Bethune-Cookman right there on the Atlantic coastline, moving over to the SWAC to play schools in like Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, et cetera. So
right. Well, Florida A&M, not Prairie View.
No, yeah.
But the MEAC has actually been in talks with 2 D2 schools. So they are adding 2 teams in Kentucky State and Virginia State. But that's not going to be for a while. So
So then we kind of covered that. That's the picture here. Let's kind of round out where we're at with the FCS level before we kind of talk overarching what could happen at the FBS level that could just throw everything we're about to say into a whole nother spin cycle here. Let's start with the WAC, just because I think it's a little bit quicker of a story. You think they stick at 8 teams, or you think they're looking to maybe get up to? In my opinion, 9 is the perfect amount for football in the FCS level.
Right.
With it being traditionally an 11-game schedule, every 5 years you get the 12th. But that way you're playing everybody once, 8 games, and that leaves you to 3 out-of-conference games where hopefully you're doing competitive FCS home and home, probably an FCS team you can beat coming to your house just so you get the playoff resume, and then probably a P5, G5 payout game for most of these schools.
I like 9. I don't know how quick the WAC will move to 9, though. I don't know if there's any development on the talks of the WAC talking to Weber State, Northern Colorado, Northern Arizona. We haven't heard any development on that. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But the WAC would be smart to at least go after Northern Arizona or Northern Colorado.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's interesting. So from what I've heard, NAU is a little bit almost trying to put their toes in the water there and see what the WAC's all about. I mean, they're swimming dives already in the WAC. But you look at that, I know we're not going to get into New Mexico State. I don't think they're coming down the FCS level.
No, they're not.
But obviously member of the WAC that plays football that won't be a part of this football conference. But I think NAU would make the jump, which makes me sad as a Big Sky guy because they've been in the conference longer than like the likes of Boise State and Eastern Washington.
They're a charter member, are they not?
They're like 4 or 5 years into it. Yeah, they joined in like 1970, I believe. The started in like 63 or 64. So it's basically, they've been there the entire time, which makes me like really want to keep them. And like Weber, who's also the same thing. It's like they've been in the conference like 17 years longer than Eastern Washington, for example. Like numbers might be off there, but a wee bit longer. But they make geographical sense. Their kind of biggest rival was Southern Utah, I guess you would say. I mean, I'm not an NAU fan, but like looking at it from the outside perspective, it's drivable. They had some good games with one another. That game is now moved over to the WAC. I think they've admitted they're going to try to keep a scheduling thing going. But it
so why not just go ahead and make the jump to the WAC and make it a conference rivalry?
And then you add Dixie, right? Like now you kind of have 3 of those teams. It makes those schools feel less on an island. You kind of have this triangle where they can all play, one. If you're NAU, you basically have one of them at home and you get to go to Utah. So it helps you also open up your Utah recruiting, which Utah's a very underrated state out west for recruiting. I mean, it's not California, but as far as like probably Washington and Utah are the second best. And then you got like Colorado, Arizona. But it would make sense for NAU. I think the WAC doesn't have any interest in NAU is the issue. And then you look at the other side of it. I don't think Weber wants to join the WAC But it seems like the WAC really wants Weber to try to make that once again, they want to keep Southern Utah and Dixie State happy. Where I feel like Weber is like, well, we're not taking a risk on a new conference when we have this established conference, which they've won the title 4 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But
so what's keeping them from going for Northern Colorado?
I mean,
because Northern Colorado is out on a 20,000 mile away from inland type island.
And I don't want
the big sky.
I don't want to crap on Northern Colorado here. Right now, I think the competitiveness isn't there. We'll see what McCaffrey's able to do with that program. But if you're really trying to be like a power conference, right? And one of the current power conferences is trying to get rid of you, not like we're actively, but like when people talk about thinning out the big sky, usually Northern Colorado is towards the top of that list for most folks. So I think if you're the WAC, you're like, okay, well, we can't really add them and then add our level of play, right? Unless they start winning, which maybe you take that gamble on them and you say, we think they're going to start winning and McCaffrey's going to stay a while. Then you also look at schools like Cal Poly, UC Davis, who are only football affiliated members of the Big Sky, maybe trying to scoop one of them. But I mean, I think your best bet is probably trying to hope that West Texas A&M also wants to make the jump from D2. If you're the WAC, then you're at your 9. You have 3 D2 schools that moved up, but you also have a team starting. It might be rough at the beginning. West Texas A&M, great D2 program. I think then you kind of almost make what the Big 12 is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do if I was the commissioner of the WAC.
Well, I have heard that the WAC went after West Texas A&M. That's who I thought they were going to go after.
Mm-hmm.
But then I read an article where West Texas A&M said we're not leaving D2.
Yeah, well.
But that could have also been a denial statement to kind of hide some stuff that's actually happening.
Yep. And I think we're about to see a lot of opinions change on multiple levels of the college football landscape. But let's move into the other conference that's not the OVC that got picked over a lot here. Big South. You think they're happy where they're at?
For right now, like I think this year is going to really make the Big South analyze where they are right now, because they're losing 2 schools to the ASUN. So I don't know. And that's a huge loss, losing Kennesaw State. Mm-hmm. So I personally think the Big South, once those 2 leave, they may try to look at somebody to bring in. Now, who that might be, I mean, honestly, you could go after Western Carolina. They're not that good in the SoCon, but they're loyal to the SoCon, because we in the ASUN thought the ASUN was going to go after Western Carolina, and that was shut down real quick.
Yeah. But then you also look at it like, if whoever's left, like if they don't make moves, right, and you're Monmouth, now this conference isn't any more competitive than maybe the NEC would be, and then you're closer to home, and you would probably still dominate that conference. So, like, then are they at the risk of losing Monmouth altogether if they can't bring in another power? Because I'm not convinced NCAA is as happy with the situation as they were when they signed. I could see them jumping ship rather quickly as well.
And going, I think that's what's about to happen. I think NCAA is going to stay in the Big South for a few years and then jump ship to the ASUN.
Yeah.
That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Which is going to be phenomenal for us.
Yeah.
Because we have like 5 powers in our conference, which would be phenomenal. But honestly, I think what's about to happen, like I told you before we got on here, I think you're about to see the MEAC kind of dissolve in on itself. And so you could see possibly a Big South and MEAC merger.
Yeah, see what the scraps of the MEAC either all go SWAC or leftovers get picked up by the Big South or vice versa. I think that is a realistic possibility as well. All right, so let's get into it here. Let's start with the ASUN, because like you said, 5 right now with teams on the way, obviously not 5 playing this season. But for all intents and purposes, the conference has 5. Moving forward, who knows how long this video doesn't date itself, right? I'm sure it outdates itself almost tomorrow with all the movement going on. But I'm assuming the goal's 9.
Nine. I think it would be 9. I think they kind of want to make this. It's either 9 or more because I think they don't want to get bigger than the Big Sky, but I don't think they want to be as big as the Big Sky. But maybe 11 teams, kind of like what the Missouri Valley has.
Yeah.
So I think 10, 11 might be the max for the ASUN, but we'll see.
Okay, so now you're looking at the ASUN at 5. I've been on your show before, so I'll put a link to it down in the description for everyone else to listen to it. And this is obviously about a year old now. Well, not really. We covered it in the spring, but you know, what are the fits here? I mean, on your show, I talked about and it sounds like they've kind of said it now too, become the SEC of the FCS, and that's where I said you kind of pick that same footprint. You find those teams that fill that SEC void, right? And that's where I was going. Maybe you look at an Austin Peay, so you get that Tennessee, Vanderbilt type. You get into Tennessee, but you're closer to this, so I kind of want to hear what you say, and then I'm going to be that outside perspective that goes, but what about this team? How come this isn't being considered?
Well, the obvious ones that have been talked about, Austin Peay. Again, they've made a statement, or there's been some new information from discussion boards come through that say that Austin Peay is not considering a move to the to the ASUN. They want to stay in the OVC. So who knows what's going to happen with that? I mentioned SEMO if you want to get into Missouri and keep that Missouri footprint like the SEC does. They're close to UCA. It gives them a travel partner. I've mentioned James Madison, but that's very unlikely to happen. Ever since that episode, I've seen numerous different teams mentioned. I've heard Richmond mentioned. I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know if they want to stay in the CAA or not, but I could see Richmond making the move to the ASUN. It would give Liberty a travel partner in other sports, but they'd be the only Virginia team in the FCS in the conference. Like I just mentioned, you could see NCA&T staying in the Big South for a few years and making the move to the ASUN. They have been mentioned a ton, and I mean a ton, especially over the summer. But the conference I think that is going to be picked up the most is another conference I think is going to dissolve on itself, kind of like what the Big 12 is about to do. I think you could see the Southland dissolve in on itself, and teams like McNeese, Sela, Nichols, all of them join the ASUN, even Northwestern State. But you've also had D2 teams mentioned like West Florida, Valdosta State, West Georgia, even West Alabama. So, I mean, there's plenty of teams that have been mentioned, but I think your most likely to happen would be North Carolina A&T and the Southland teams.
Yeah. So this is a good point. So you're looking at I'm even thinking Houston Baptist, right? The WAC has said they're not taking them. You got some time to kind of see if it was just Bailey Zappi or there's something, Then you're into that Texas market. In fact, right down in the center of Houston. Now, I'm sure Houston Baptist is not a huge alumni base. It's private school, right? But, like you mentioned, if you could get a McNeese, a Nichols, traditional powers in the FCS, yes, they're down right now. But if you could get them, that gets you to 7 right there. You mentioned you get Sela 2 probably. Now you're at 8. Sela, the best out of those 2 teams right now, or 3 teams right now. So now you have this Louisiana thing going, and then you really only got to find one. And I mean, you mentioned you got Austin Peay to pick from, possibly Chattanooga to pick from. I mean,
Chattanooga has already said, their AD has actually publicly come forward and said we are not moving from the SoCon.
The SoCon's got some loyal, as we have the App State background, former SoCon team. But yeah, like I said, maybe you get NCA&T. Boom, there's your 9. That's JSU, UCA, EKU, Kennesaw, UNA. And then we'll say maybe you go with I just lost my train of thought there, but you Sela, Nichols, McNeese, and then maybe NCA&T or Austin Peay. So you're looking at 10 to 9. That's a good conference. That's a conference with a lot of playoff appearances in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's would solidify a fourth best conference with the WAC also making it an appearance, where I still think the WAC right now, I think it is a better conference, but that bottom of the WAC right now looks to
So
choke. We
a
don't know
Power
it.
5 at the FCS level?
Yeah, which is wild to see. But we got to see, because like I said, the WAC's bottom could be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Tarleton could be bad. Dixie could be awful. Rio Grande Valley State could never win a game. We don't know, right? These programs, we don't really know yet. Yes, they have Sam Houston. Hell, who knows the way stuff's going? Like, who knows? Sam Houston could get upset with the WAC in 5 years and jump ship to the A-Sun. So, like, who knows anymore, right? Texas left for the SEC. Who would have ever guessed that, right?
Well,
they ran the Big 12, and they're leaving their own mess.
Yeah, you mentioned Houston Baptist. If we were to ever get into the Texas market, I would much rather go after Incarnate Word.
Yeah, smart.
But
true,
they've been in talks with the WAC. But there are so many stories that have not been developed since the story came out publicly. Yep. So we don't know what's happening.
Yeah. So let's get into the overarching here, right? So much of this is going to pin on what the FBS does. And there's been a lot of talk. I've seen a lot of the Big 12's plan apparently at the moment is to stick together. One, because Texas and Oklahoma have to pay them until 2025 or whatever, a ton of money. But like you said, it only takes one more school to really make the jump. Kansas maybe trying to be like, all right, let's go to the Big Ten for basketball. West Virginia going, with no Texas and Oklahoma and the money disappearing, we need to start befriending either the Big Ten as well. They've got a decent basketball program. They'd be a good match for like Pitt and Rutgers now, Maryland, or the ACC, which I think has basically told West Virginia they're not interested a couple times. But, the Big Ten, maybe they need to go to 16 teams. Boom, they pluck Kansas, they pluck West Virginia. Who knows? There's 1,000 situations here. But where does that leave the FCS? Because you could have conferences like the Mountain West get picked over. There's a lot of teams out west. The Big Sky's kind of big. Missouri Valley also in that picking range. Do we see North Dakota State? Do we see South Dakota State? I don't think they make the jump to the Big 10 or the Big 12. I've heard some people be like, yeah, NDSU to the Big 12. I'm like, I just don't see it. One, their stadium would be like 30,000 less than everybody else's in that conference. But they could make the jump to maybe like a Mountain West, who, let's say, Boise State and maybe Colorado State get picked over to join the new Big 12. There's some movement that could happen. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts on, are there FCS teams out there that are going to get poached in the next 5 to 10 years? And we're going to have a redo of like the Sun Belt, basically building a power FCS conference that now the Sun Belt used to be, when Idaho was in it again, the joke. It was the worst conference in the FBS level. No questions about it. Now you could argue it is better than the Mountain West. It's definitely better than the MAC, and it's definitely better than the Conference USA. It's not quite AAC, but close. Well, I mean, it's gaining every year.
I was about to say you could almost, keyword almost, put it on the same level as the American. But just to comment on the Big 12, the only way North Dakota State and South Dakota State would go to the Big 12 is if they get picked off so much and the only team left is Kansas State. That's the only way both of those teams get picked off. And then you could easily see McNeese get brought into the Big 12 if that's the case, if that very unlikely situation happens.
But see, I think then you're more likely to see like UL get picked to the Big 12 and McNeese then fill the Sun Belt footprint. I think that's more the route we're going. I don't think anyone's going to make a jump straight to the Power 5.
Well, at that point, Big 12 wouldn't be Power 5.
True. Well, they have their status. I don't know all the legality of this. I know they're allowed to still have a conference with 4 members and still get the grant of rights, is from what I've been hearing. So I don't know how all that works. If they keep their autonomous status to where their conference champions still gets to play in the New Year's Six Bowl, which is part of the reason some of these schools don't want to leave. They're like, well, right now, without Texas and Oklahoma for the next 5 years, we still get that money and we still get to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. So we're just going to get like Baylor and TCU playing in the Citrus Bowl now, or Orange Bowl or Cotton Bowl, instead of like Texas or Oklahoma. And I think, not getting too into the FBS, I mean, I think the American's probably going to have 1 or 2 openings. I think the Mountain West could have an opening. And this is regardless of if it's the Big 12. Like, who knows? There's been talks. Maybe Colorado comes to the Big 12. Now the Pac-12 needs a team, right? Like, I don't know where they go. I mean, UNLV is making some strides, but they're not there yet. Boise State doesn't have the academics. I mean, maybe like Colorado State. I just don't think. I don't know what Pac-12 would do. Honestly, they'd probably go get like Texas Tech or something. But
to go back to like just the Big 12 sticking together and poaching teams, I think, like you said, I could see Louisiana get poached. I could see Colorado State get poached. I could see, SMU, Rice. So like there's a Conference USA team, 2 American teams, and a Mountain West team already poached. Yeah. So obviously the American is going to rebuild. They're not going to look any lower than the other group of 5 conferences. Sorry, James Madison fans, you're going to have to accept it. Sorry.
No, but we've talked about that. If you're a James Madison fan and they openly crapped on the invite to the Sun Belt, I mean, you have to look back at the success Coastal Carolina's had, the success App State has had.
Right.
And you've got to kind of go, shoot. Like, we might have screwed up there. We've won a national title at the FCS level, so maybe not, right? We've gone to a couple, but shoot. Like, there's money there. Is Flow Sports paying you what ESPN's paying the Sun Belt? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't pay for Flow Sports, so I pay for ESPN. So,
I mean, you're going to see all of those conferences rebuild. So, like, you could see North Dakota State or South Dakota State go to the Mountain West. You could see maybe Montana and Montana State get looked at as well. For the Sun Belt, you could see James Madison, Jacksonville State, Kennesaw State, Chattanooga, Austin Peay be looked at. Probably not Austin Peay, but, I mean, they've gained a reputation within the past few years. McNeese, yes. So, I mean, there's a number of teams that you could see get poached and get put in that Sun Belt region. I think your more likely teams to do that would be James Madison, Jacksonville State, and McNeese. I'll go ahead and throw Chattanooga and Kennesaw in there as well.
Yeah. So this brings in, we basically listed there's like 10 to 15 schools that are eligible to be poached out of the FCS in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? This brings up our last little point here of the day. Is the FCS going to even resemble the FCS in 10 years? Like, are we looking at a point now?
No, the FCS you see now will be the new group of 5.
I honestly see a shift to where you are going to have basically 45 big budget schools is what I'll call them. So your Power 5 leftovers that might even dump some schools. We'll see. But like, I don't know if like Rutgers makes the cut for the new Power 5 anymore, right?
I don't think Vandy does either. I don't think Kansas does either.
I don't think Vandy cares to anymore. Right?
No, they don't. No. All they care about is baseball.
Yeah. So it's like, I think you're going to see a big shift where you're going to see basically the 45 big budget schools. You'll probably see like your Washington States, your Kansas States, your Indianas will probably still make that push to be there because they just have that historic rivalry with most of those teams, even though they've got basically zero shot of ever winning this new probably 12-team playoff, or they move it back down to 4, and it almost acts more like an NFL, which is going to suck. As a college football fan, it's going to suck.
Yeah.
But think
your better playoff system will still be more like what the FCS is now. It'll just be the new group of 5.
Yep. And I think that's where the FCS has room to shine. And this was my whole takeaway for the whole conference realignment is like, I think you're going to see the group of 5 and the top tier, the schools that could actually compete with the current like group of 5. So like, sorry, like, God, I don't want to pick on anyone. Western Illinois, like, hopefully there's no Leatherneck fans, but if you are, I'm sorry. I don't think you could compete in this new tier. I think you're going to see a new tier where it's G or Power 5, maybe break away from the NCAA altogether. Yeah. and then you're going to have about 100 teams that compete in basically what was the old D1 AA, and teams moved up or whatever, and we're basically going to have that. And you might get back to regional rivalries. I think that is a huge thing that I would like to see out of all this.
For the new FBS, I think that is the goal.
Go full bore traditional college football list. Like you're not going to get the TV money of the new things. Like it's just not going to happen, especially when you're not relevant in that picture anymore. Like the Mountain West is not going to have the TV deal that it did. Neither CUSA, and thank God the MAC isn't either, so they don't have to play on Tuesdays anymore. But I think you're going to see that where like now you can get back to like having Nevada, Idaho, Boise State, Montana State, Nevada play each other. You can get back to like App State playing some of these SoCon teams, and like you can get back to having that regional rivalry, the stuff that we've kind of lost in this push for progress, this push for money, this push to become relevant and be a part of these big conferences. I think in a level playing field, like you see in college basketball, where a conference champion is guaranteed a spot. I think without this push and this leveling and everything like that, you could see more regionalization again. And I think that could help bring in some more eyes, because I think eventually some people are not going to like the taste of an NFL P5. Some people will love it. Some people will be indifferent to it.
I won't.
But I think the FCS G5 merger that really looks imminent in the next 10 to 15 years could really draw some of these people back and be like, Texas is baked. Like Texas versus Alabama is basically it's basically going to be the D League for the NFL. Like it is going to be the developmental league. And you already see people that are pissed about the NIL stuff, and that stuff's not going away. But I think if you saw something that sticks more traditional and goes kind of back to its roots of like you play teams that you are similar to, like you're not going to have a big school like I'm trying to find examples here, but like you're probably not going to see a school like McNeese play Grambling, right? Like they're not really historic rivals. I know they're close, but they've never really had that much interlap. They were never in conferences together, to my knowledge. Like I don't think you're going to see that, but you're going to see like some of the old SoCon power back up, which would be good for FCS fans. Like I'd love to see App State kind of be back in its roots. But then with that, you also have this weird fixed flavor of like, well, now App State has some history in the Sun Belt. So like, does that mean maybe we get a conference with like JSU, App State, Troy?
See, that's what I was about to bring up. That would be what I'm most excited about, being able to play the Georgia Southerns and the App States on almost a daily basis, if not every other year.
Yep. You get JMU playing like East Carolina, Old Dominion,
App State.
Yeah.
Coastal Carolina.
Yeah. And like you can get back to regional to where like a team like doesn't have to be in New Jersey and play in Atlanta, right? Like a team doesn't have to be in Portland, Oregon and play in, I mean, I guess that's the Big Sky's big, but it's actually pretty regionalized for its spot. But like West Virginia doesn't have to play in Texas, right? Like Iowa doesn't have to play. It would make things so much easier. Like I would love to see, well, this will happen at the Big Five, but like Maryland, Pitt, and West Virginia should still be playing each other. Like,
yes, I completely agree.
We moved away. We screwed up college football. And I think it's going to take, I think the FCS is there to kind of fix some of it. Those big schools.
I mean, you're already seeing it at the FCS level.
Yeah.
You're seeing teams move conferences to be more regional and have meaningful games, not only to the school, but to the conference and what's going to be best for getting into the postseason.
Yeah. Like Central Arkansas. It just is a better fit to be in the ASUN, especially with the way that the Southland went when it basically got rid of all of the Texas schools. I know Arkansas is basically as close to Louisiana as is Texas, but Arkansas as a state, I think, aligns more as like a Texas type of state, similar state, than it does with Louisiana. So when the Texas schools left, they're like, okay, well, like, Arkansas State plays some of these schools in the Sun Belt. So we had that little bit of a regional rivalry. So let's be like Arkansas State and play more in that region. Whereas like Arkansas, for example, used to be in the Big 12, left that, and now they're in the SEC playing kind of that same similar footprint of schools. And that's where, I don't know, that's my big takeaway is I hope that's what happens. It could not, right? Everything could fall apart, especially the way TV deals are going to be worked out in the future. Nobody knows. But
if your scenario happens, which I think it will, because that's exactly where we are headed. What happens in this next wave of conference realignment really sets the tone for the future of college football. And you could very well see, as a Jack State fan, both my parents went to Jack State, so there's one rivalry that I would love to get back. And you could see JSU and Troy be playing every single year. Not only them, but a rivalry that should have been a rivalry ever since UAB started their program in JSU and UAB.
Yep. And I think that's right. And that's the thing in the news thing. Like, yeah, you're probably Jack State's not going to play Alabama, but that's because they're gone anyways. But like, could you have a conference with all the Alabama teams? Could you have a conference with all the Texas teams? Could you have a conference with all the Florida teams? Like, why is USF, UCF, FIU, FAU like?
Why are they not in the same conference?
Yeah, like, and that's where I hope that's the move it goes. I know it'll be rough at first because people will be like, well, they're so much better. Like if you're Boise State, for instance, like, and you're joining a new Montana State, everything, it's like, okay, well, where's the money, right? That's the big thing is getting like the UCFs, the Cincinnatis, the Houstons on board with this because they're the schools that are going to be the most pissed about being left out of the big dance.
Right.
But at some point, it's going to come to reality. It's like, okay, Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, form your own big national-wide conference. And you guys will be the absolute last domino the fall when you guys realize the money's not going to be there because you're not playing the big boys anymore anyways, and you'd be better off slipping back into a conference that makes sense for you. And then the money has to get worked out because that will be the big thing.
Here's another thing I think is going to be big for this. Yes, you're going to have the D League, so to say, in the bigger schools, but I don't think people realize if that happens, the new FBS is still going to be making a ton of money off of TV revenue.
Yep. Well,
and when you said, and here's another thing, are we going to keep the 24-team playoff, or are we going to knock it down to 20 or 16?
I think you'd probably get it maybe even bigger because you'll have more teams in it. Because that's the other thing. You got to figure out a conference. Like, and that's the thing. Who makes the cut? Who doesn't make the cut? Because the whole FCS ain't coming. That's the other thing. There are schools like I know Tarleton.
Teams like JSU ain't gonna let all the bad FCS teams come with us.
Like Tarleton State and Dixie, you're feeder to the fire. You guys need to look good quick. Southern Utah, you need to get back on it. Northern Colorado,
especially
Edna Caffrey has to work.
Especially with those two conferences wanting to make the jump to FBS as a conference within 10 years.
And that's
which I don't think that's going to happen, but.
Well, because I don't think it's going to be there. The one thing is the WAC has a back door because it was an FBS conference. It doesn't have to reapply for chartership. It can just literally jump up with teams that meet requirements, which right now they don't have. But yeah, like, sorry, Butler, Dayton, entire Pioneer League, you're probably not coming. Sorry, most of the NEC, if not all the NEC, you're not coming. The Ivy Leagues will be interesting. I think they might be better off going this new D2. The only issue is they founded D1, so I don't think they're going to let that happen, even though we could literally do without the Ivies. But yeah,
they need to form their own little league.
Just be their own thing.
Yes.
They only play one out-of-conference game, I believe, anyways. Just cut it away.
Yeah, they play a 10-game schedule every year.
Yeah, so just cut it away and just play each other and do your own little thing and have your own championship, whatever. But yeah, I think the rest of it, you could trim probably 30 to 40 teams out of the FCS. You could then combine with the remaining 40 to 50 teams from the FBS. And then there you are. You have about 110 team conference that has passionate fan bases, not like the big boys, but you're not going to get to the big boys. Look how much success UCF, Boise State have had, and they're not even close. So just be the NDSU.
Which mostly is not their fault. True.
But, I mean, Boise State ain't selling out their stadium. How much success do you have to have, and you can't sell out 32,000 seats,
Right.
You're not going to get there. Unfortunately, college football got so money focused in the original round when they finally said you can get your own TV deals. And we were already so far behind the 8 ball because the network's got to show us Michigan, show us Notre Dame, show us Alabama, USC, and those became the brands. And you've been behind the 8 ball ever since. But we've run up on our short and tiny kind of episode, but I think we had some good conversations. Do you have any kind of final takeaways on conference realignment? And then tell the people kind of what you're up to, how they can find you.
Just the last thing I'm going to say about conference realignment, ladies and gentlemen, you better buckle up because it's going to get messy real fast. And I'm talking probably before the end of the year, going into the beginning of next year. It's going to get messy real fast.
Everybody's just waiting to see what the Big 12 does.
Yep. As far as finding me on social media, you can find my my JSU podcast by this handle on Instagram and Twitter. Request to join our Facebook community, and one of the admins will approve you. I'm also a host of the newest podcast around the ASUN with the one and only Will Seiler. So that handle is at Around the ASUN. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter, and then also join our Facebook community Around the ASUN podcast. And yeah, all of our information for both of those podcasts will be posted on all social media platforms.
Yep, and all their stuff links down in the description too. So if you're a slow listener, you can just go click and get it easy. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in to the first ever FCS Football Chris show. Hopefully we got more to come. If you got ideas, stuff you would like, kind of like you do on the FCS Fans Nation podcast that you would just like a little bit more in depth on, maybe a suggested guest. Any of you want to join or have something you want to talk about, hit me up on Twitter. Obviously, my stuff's on the screen as well, or find me on the FCS Fans Nation Facebook page. But I want to thank you guys for all tuning into the inaugural episode. Brandon Owens for being the first guest. And we'll see about 1 to 3 of these a week. View it as your FCS version of College Football Live. You guys keep saying you want more coverage. FCS Fans Nation is giving it to you. Peace. We'll see you guys in the next one.